Chapter 23. A splendid midsummer shone over England. What I want you guys to notice is how much poetry is in the first few paragraphs. So notice the S sounds like a sh sound. There's alliteration. It's really beautiful. And also the scenery, the imagery that we see. Skies so pure, suns so radiant, as were then seen in long succession, seldom favor, even singly, our wave-girt land. It was as if a band of Italian days had come from the south, like a flock of glorious passenger birds, and lighted to rest on them on the cliffs of Albion. So there's a lot of S's in this. It's a changed style. Birds come from the book that she read at Gateshead. I don't know if you remember, but like chapter 1, she reads a book on birds. Birds also have symbolism, which I'll point out later. And there's a false sense of security and happiness. The hay was all got in. The fields round Thornfield were green and shorn, the roads white and baked. The trees were in their dark prime, hedge and wood, full-leaved and deeply tinted, contrasted well with the sunny hue of the cleared meadows between. On Midsummer Eve, Adele, and midsummer could be an allusion to Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, just so you guys know, and we'll get another allusion to that. Adele, weary with gathering wild strawberries in Hay Lane half the day, had gone to bed with the sun. I watched her drop asleep, and when I left her, I sought the garden. So this is a period of enchantment and mysticism. Also, gardens have fruit, which could be a sexual innuendo. I know, trees are like quite promiscuous in literature, guys. They don't do anything, just hint at these things. It was now the sweetest hour of the 24. Day its fervid fires had wasted, and that's an allusion or quote from Thomas Campbell's The Turkish Lady. And dew fell cool on panting plain and scorched summit. So now we're going to get a bunch of P's and S's. Where the sun had gone down in simple state, pure of the pomp of clouds, spread in a solemn purple, burning with the light of red jewel and furnace flame at one point, on one hill peaked, and the extending high and wide, soft and still softer over half heaven. The east had its own charm of fine, deep blue, and its own modest gem, a rising and solitary star. Soon it would boast the moon, but she was yet beneath the horizon. So she has light images. Jane is painting the scene, but without anxiety. I walked a while on the pavement, but a subtle, well-known scent, that of a cigar, which is a male scent, stole from the window. I saw the library casement open a handbreadth. I knew I might be watched thence, so I went into the orchard. So she knows Mr. Rochester is watching her a little bit, and so she's going to go somewhere where he can't watch her. Both of them are kind of spying on each other. No nook in the grounds more sheltered and more Eden-like. It was full of trees. So fragrance can be exotic or erotic depending on the situation. She's in an orchard with trees. That's like the forbidden fruit from the Garden of Eden. It's Eden-like, which could be temptation. And then tree of knowledge. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in this passage. It bloomed with flowers. A very high wall shut it out from the court, which is a classical garden, on one side. On the other, a beech avenue screened it from the lawn. At the bottom was a sunk fence, its sole separation from lonely fields. A winding walk bordered with laurels and terminating in a giant horse chestnut tree, which is a symbol, so this is going to come back for sure. Circled at the base by a seat, led down to the fence. Here one could wander unseen. While such honeydew fell, such silence reigned, such gloaming gathered, and then here we're going to get some I repetition in this paragraph and the next. I felt as if I could haunt such shade forever, but in threading the flower and fruit parterres at the upper part of the enclosure, enticed there by the light the now rising moon cast on this more open quarter, my step is stayed, not by sound, not by sight, but once more by a warning fragrance. So she knows that Mr. Rochester's around and coming towards her, even though he's trying to do it very stealthily so that she can't hear or see him. Just like how she's trying to avoid him. So are they really trying to avoid each other, or is she really trying to avoid him, or is this like a game? Sweet briar and southern wood, jasmine, pink, and rose, have long been yielding their evening sacrifice of incense. This new scent is neither of shrub nor flower. It is, I know it well. Also, she just changed to the present tense. I know it well, and is neither. It is Mr. Rochester's cigar. I look round, and I listen. I see trees laden with ripening fruit. I hear a nightingale warbling in a half-wood a mile off. No moving form is visible, no coming step audible, but that perfume increases. So she's focusing on the nuances of sensual perceptions, and she switches to the present tense for immediacy to make it intense, and it really brings the audience into the scene. I must flee. I make for the wicket leading to the shrubbery, and I see Mr. Rochester entering. I step aside into the ivy recess. He will not stay long. He will soon return whence he came, and if I sit still, he will never see me. But no, eventide is as pleasant to him as it is to me, and this antique garden as attractive. And he strolls on, now lifting the gooseberry tree branches to look at the fruit, large as plums, with which they are laden, now taking a ripe cherry from the wall, now stooping toward a knot of flowers, either to inhale their fragrance or to admire the dew beads on their petals. A great moth goes humming by me. It alights on a plant at Mr. Rochester's foot. He sees it and bends to examine it. Now he has his back towards me, thought I, and he is occupied too. Perhaps if I walk softly, I can slip away unnoticed. I trode on the edging of turf that the crackle of the pebbly gravel might not betray me. He was standing among the beds at a yard or two distant from where I had to pass. The moth apparently engaged him. I shall get by very well, I meditated. As I crossed his shadow, thrown long over the garden by the moon, not yet risen high, he said quietly without turning, Jane, come look at this fellow. So he knows that she's there even if she made no noise. So it's a duet of awareness and pretense. I had made no noise. He had not eyes behind him. Could his shadow feel? I started at first, and then I approached him. Look at his wings, said he. He reminds me rather of a West Indian insect. And so that's a symbol of someone else in the story that we haven't met yet. And that's why it's so great to read this book twice, because then you get all of these hints and you know what's coming. So read this again when you guys are older. You'll love it. One does not often see so large and gay a night rover in England. There, he is flown, which could also symbolize or foreshadow something. The moth roamed away. I was sheepishly retreating also, but Mr. Rochester followed me, and when we reached the wicket, he said, Turn back. On so lovely a night, it is a shame to sit in the house. And surely no one can wish to go to bed while sunset is thus at meeting with moonrise. It is one of my faults that, though my tongue is sometimes prompt enough at an answer, there are times when it sadly fails me in framing an excuse, and always the lapse occurs at some crisis. When a facile word or plausible pretext is especially wanted to get me out of painful embarrassment. I did not like to walk at this hour alone with Mr. Rochester in the shadowy orchard, but I could not find a reason to allege for leaving him, besides the fact that it's highly improper for them to be walking without a chaperone. I followed with lagging step and thoughts busily bent on discovering a means of extrication, but he himself looked so composed and so grave also, I became ashamed of feeling any confusion. The evil, if evil exitant or perspective there was, seemed to lie with me only. His mind was unconscious and quiet. Jane, he recommenced as we entered the laurel walk and slowly strayed down the direction of the sunk fence and the horse chestnut. Thornfield is a pleasant place in the summer, is it not? Yes, sir. You must have become in some degree attached to the house, you who have an eye for natural beauties and a good deal of the organ of adhesiveness. I am attached to it, indeed. And though I don't comprehend how it is, I perceive you have acquired a degree of regard for that foolish little child Adele, too, and even for that simple Dame Fairfax? Yes, sir. In different ways, I have an affection for them both. And would be sorry to part with them? Yes. Pity, he said and sighed and paused. It is always the way of events in this life, and he continued presently, No sooner have you got settled in a pleasant resting place than a voice calls out to you to rise and move on, for the hour of repose is expired. Must I move on, sir? I asked. Must I leave Thornfield? I believe you must, Jane. I'm sorry, Janet, but I believe indeed you must. This was a blow, but I did not let it prostrate me. Well, sir, I shall be ready when the order to march comes. It is come now. I must give it tonight. Then you are going to be married, sir? Exactly. Precisely. With your usual cuteness, you have hit the nail straight on the head. Soon, sir? Very soon, that is, Miss Eyre. And you'll remember, Jane, the first time notice how he cut himself off right there? So he knows he's playing a game, but we're going to see, like, how much of a game he's playing with her right now. I think he takes it a little too far, but I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. The first time or rumor, plainly intimated to you that it was my intention to put an old bachelor's neck into the sacred noose. Also, talking about hanging yourself as, like, the bond of marriage, that's, like, super dark, right? It's not like that. To enter into the holy estate of matrimony, to take Miss Ingram to my bosom. In short, she's an extensive armful, but that's not to the point. One can't have too much of such a very excellent thing as my beautiful Blanche. Well, as I was saying, listen to me, Jane. You're not turning your head to look after more moths, are you? That was only a ladycock, which is a ladybug, child, flying away home. I wish to remind you that it was you who first said to me, with that discretion I respect in you, with that foresight, prudence, and humility which befit your responsible and dependent position, that in case I married Miss Ingram, both you and little Adele had better trot forthwith. I pass over the sort of slur conveyed in this suggestion on the character of my beloved. Indeed, when you are far away, Janet, I'll try to forget it. I shall notice only its wisdom, which is such that I have made it my law of action. Adele must go to school, and you, Miss Eyre, must get a new situation. Yes, sir. I will advertise immediately. And meantime, I suppose I may stay here till I find another shelter to take myself to. But I stopped, feeling it would not do to risk a long sentence, for my voice was not quite under command. In about a month I hope to be a bridegroom, continued Mr. Rochester, and in the interim I shall myself look for employment and an asylum for you. Thank you, sir. I am sorry to give. Oh, no need to apologize. I consider that when a dependent does her duty as well as you have done yours, she has a sort of claim upon her employer for any little assistance he can conveniently render her. Indeed, I have already, through my future mother-in-law, heard of a place that I think will suit. It is to undertake the education of the 5 daughters of Mrs. Dionysius O'Gall of Bitternut Lodge, Connaught, Ireland. You'll like Ireland, I think. They're such warm-hearted people there, they say. It is a long way off, sir. No matter. A girl of your sense will not object to the voyage or the distance. Not the voyage, but the distance. And then the sea is a barrier. From what, Jane? From England and from Thornfield and, well, from you, sir. I know. She is so bold, right, guys? Like, he's basically saying, I'm going to marry this other woman in a month, and she's like, I don't want to be that far away from you. Right?
It's a married man.
I know. It's so exciting. I mean, would you guys be so bold as to tell someone that when you think, right? I know. And she's
Married, I have no business standing with him. Myself.
and she's 18. She's 18 years old on top of it, and he's like 36 or 37.
And she's already
I know. I said this almost involuntarily, and with as little sanction of free will, my tears gushed out. I did not cry so as to be heard, however. I avoided sobbing. The thought of Mrs. O'Gall and Bitternut Lodge struck cold to my heart, and colder to the thought of all the brine and foam, destined, as it seemed, to rush between me and the master at whose side I now walked. The coldest the remembrance of the wider ocean, wealth, caste, custom intervened between me and what I naturally and inevitably loved. It is a long way, I said again. It is, to be sure, and when you get to Butternut Lodge, Connaught, Ireland, I shall never see you again, Jane. That's morally certain. I never go to Ireland, not having myself much of a fancy for the country. We have been good friends, Jane, have we not? And he's also, like, not even commenting, like, that she basically said that she's going to miss him, right? He's, like, totally glossed over that, which is odd because he pays so much attention to her. He notices so many things, right?
part of the game.
It's definitely part of the game.
I mean, he's 36. It's gotta be a hope.
Yes, sir. And when friends are on the eve of separation, They like to spend the little time that remains to them close to each other. Come, we'll talk over the voyage and the parting quietly, half an hour or so, while the stars enter into their shining life up in heaven yonder. Here is the chestnut tree. Here is the bench at its old roots. Come, we will sit there in peace tonight, though we should never more be destined to sit there together. He seated me and himself. It is a long way to Ireland, Janet, and I am sorry to send my little friend on such weary travels. But if I can't do better, how is it to be helped? Are you anything akin to me, do you think, Jane? I could risk no sort of answer by this time. My heart was full. Because, he said, I sometimes have a queer feeling with regard to you, especially when you are near me, as now. It is as if I have a string somewhere under my left ribs, tightly and inextricably knotted to a similar string situated in the corresponding quarter of your little frame. And if that boisterous little channel and 200 miles or so of land come broad between us, I'm afraid that cord of communion will be snapped, and then I've a nervous notion I should take to bleeding inwardly. As for you, you'd forget me. So this is an allusion to Adam and Eve, because Eve supposedly was made from Adam's left rib, right? But he's basically saying, like, he feels like such a connection with her as, like, the perfect couple, quote unquote, of Adam and Eve. And that if he were to be parted from her, he would die of heartache, of heartbreak, right? So he's, like, playing kind of...
He's telling this to her under a tree.
Yes! He's...
Night.
Yeah, is this the tree of knowledge, guys?
Oh my God.
Right? That I should never do. I never should, sir. You know, impossible to proceed. Jane, do you hear that nightingale singing in the wood? Listen. And so now he's like, oh, let's listen to nature now, even though they're both saying these profound things that the other is not acknowledging. In listening, I sobbed convulsively, for I could repress what I endured no longer. So now she's like just openly crying, and he's sitting right next to her. So he has to know what's going on, right? I was obliged to yield, and I was shaken from head to foot with acute distress. When I did speak, it was only to express an impetuous wish that I had never been born or never come to Thornfield. Because you are sorry to leave it? The vehemence of emotion stirred by grief and love within me was claiming mastery and struggling for full sway and asserting a right to predominate, to overcome, to live, rise, and reign at last. Yes, and to speak. I grieve to leave Thornfield. I love Thornfield. I love it because I have lived in it a full and delightful life. Momentarily, at least. I have not been trampled on. I have not been petrified. I have not been buried with inferior minds and excluded from every glimpse of communion with what is bright and energetic and high. I have talked face to face with what I reverence, with what I delight in, with an original, a vigorous, and expanded mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester, and it strikes me with terror and anguish to feel I absolutely must be torn from you forever. I see the necessity of departure, and it is like looking on the necessity of death. Again, like, holy cow, she is bold to say, like, the idea of leaving you makes me want to die. Where do you see the necessity? He asked suddenly. Where? You, sir, have placed it before me. In what shape? In the shape of Miss Ingram, a noble and beautiful woman, your bride. So she's thinking of Blanche, and she's wrong, right? I know, what is he saying? My bride? What bride? I have no bride.
Ain't no way.
I know, this is the game, right?
He just, took that title off from, being an almost married man to saying, oh, I have no bride.
Right? He's almost gaslighting her, right? This is such a transition. But you will have? Yes, I will. I will. He set his teeth. Then I must go. You have said so yourself. No, you must stay. I swear it, and the oath shall be kept. I tell you I must go, I retorted, roused to something like passion. Do you think I can stay to become nothing to you? Do you think I'm an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips and my drop of living water dashed from my cup, so he's the morsel of bread and the living water? Do you think, because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart. And if God had gifted me with some beauty and much wealth, I should have made it as hard for you to leave me as it is now for me to leave you. She's being so bold right now. I'm not talking to you now through the medium of custom, conventionalities, nor even of mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave and we stood at God's feet. equal as we are. So she wants equality in marriage, which is not common in this time period. It's like a proto-feminist idea. Usually the man is above the woman and he like owns her, for lack of a better term, and that she has to be subservient. So she does not want that. And she's saying everything she feels. As we are, repeated Mr. Rochester. So, he added, enclosing me in his arms, gathering me to his breast, pressing his lips on my lips. So, Jane. I know. You're also not supposed to kiss until you're engaged in this time period.
Yeah, this is scandalous. It's basically like, you know what?
Mm-hmm. It is so scandalous right now.
And he made the first move first.
As he should in this time period for sure, but yes.
That was like,
aren't they supposed to have like supervised like walks?
Exactly. They don't have a chaperone either, and it's starting to be nighttime. So it's like
That's even worse.
right? I know.
under a tree.
Bro,
Under
somebody
possibly
caught-
the tree of knowledge, like or good and evil.
If somebody caught them, she would be called a whore. It wouldn't even be on him.
I know.
Bridgerton did have to get married.
Yes. I love the connection. Another season's coming out soon. Yes, so sir, I rejoined. So she just totally ignores that he just kissed her. Okay? So they're like gaslighting each other right now. I don't know. And yet not so. For you are a married man, or as good as a married man, and wed to one inferior to you, to one with whom you have no sympathy, with whom I do not believe you truly love. So she's now admitting, like, I've been watching you, and you do not really like her. For I have seen and heard you sneer at her. I would scorn such a union. Therefore, I am better than you. Let me go. Where, Jane? To Ireland? Yes, to Ireland. I've spoken my mind and can go anywhere now. Jane, be still. Don't struggle so, like a wild, frantic bird that is rending its own plumage in its desperation. So birds are symbols for women, and this is a literary trope. They use it in tons of texts. And so usually women are birds in cages that they're trapped and they can't do anything. He's acting as her cage right now, which I don't know if that's better or worse as a symbol when he's kind of proposing. I don't know. I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you. Another effort set me at liberty, and I stood erect before him. And your will shall decide your destiny, he said. I offer you my hand, my heart, and a share of all of my possessions. You play a farce, which I merely laugh at. So she does not believe that he's proposing to her right now. Because he just said he was going to marry Blanche and send her to Ireland, right? I ask you to pass through life at my side, to be my second self, my best earthly companion. And so he's basically saying that he wants her to be his equal too. For that fate you have already made your choice and must abide by it. Jane, be still a few moments. You are overexcited, and I will be still too. A waft of wind came sweeping down the laurel walk and trembled through the boughs of the chestnut. It wandered away to an indefinite distance. It died. The nightingale's song was then the only voice of the hour. In listening to it, I again wept. Mr. Rochester sat quiet, looking at me gently and seriously. Some time before he spoke, he said at last, "Come to my side, Jane, and let us explain and understand one another. I will never again come to your side. I am torn away now and cannot return. But Jane, I summon you as my wife. It is you only I intend to marry." I was silent. I thought he mocked me. "Come, Jane, come hither. Your bride stands between us," which has a double meaning which you guys will understand later. He rose and with a stride reached me. "My bride is here," he said, again drawing me to him, "because my equal is here," and that's what she wants, "and my likeness. Jane, will you marry me?" Still I did not answer, and still I writhed myself from his grasp, for I was still incredulous. "Do you doubt me, Jane?" So now she's playing with him. She should doubt him, though she's only teasing. "Entirely. You have no faith in me?" "Not a whit." "Am I a liar in your eyes?" he asked passionately. "Little skeptic, you shall be convinced. What love have I for Miss Ingram? None, and that you know. What love has she for me? None. As I have taken pains to prove, I caused a rumor to reach her that my fortune was not a third of what it was supposed, and that after I presented myself to see the result, it was coldness both from her and her mother. I would not. I could not marry Miss Ingram. You strange, you almost unearthly thing I love as my own flesh. You poor and obscure and small and plain as you are, I entreat you to accept me as a husband. What, me? I ejaculated, beginning in his earnestness and especially in his incivility to credit his sincerity. Me, who have not a friend in the world but you? If you are my friend, not a shilling, but what would you have given me? You, Jane, I must have you for my own, entirely my own. Will you be mine? Say yes quickly. Mr. Rochester, let me look at your face. Turn to the moonlight. Why? Because I want to read your countenance. Turn. There. You will find it scarcely more legible than a crumpled, scratched page. Read on, only make haste, for I suffer. His face was very much agitated and very much flushed, and there were strong workings in the features and strange gleams in the eyes. Oh, Jane, you torture me, he exclaimed, with that searching and yet faithful and generous look. You torture me. How can I do that? If you are true and your offer real, my only feelings to you must be gratitude and devotion. They cannot torture. Gratitude, he ejaculated and added wildly. Jane, accept me quickly. Say, Edward, give me my name. First names are really important in this time period. It implies that you are more than just casual friends. Normally, they just called each other by their last names. So give me my name, Edward. I will marry you. Are you in earnest? Do you truly love me? Do you sincerely want me to be your wife? I do. And if an oath is necessary to satisfy you, I swear it. Then, sir, I will marry you. Edward, my little wife, dear Edward, come to me entirely now, said he, and added in his deepest tone, speaking in my ear as his cheek was laid on mine, make my happiness, and I will make yours. God pardon me, he subjoined ere long, and man meddle not with me. I have her, and I will hold her. There is no one to meddle, sir, and I have no kindred to interfere. No, that is the best of it, he said. So he's happy that he's not going to have in-laws, which is kind of a joke that people make even today. And if I loved him less, I should have thought his accent and look of exultation savage. But sitting by him, roused from the nightmare of parting, called to the paradise of union, I thought only of the bliss given me to drink in so abundant a flow. Again and again he said, Are you happy, Jane? And again I answered, Yes. After which he murmured, It will atone, it will atone. Have I not found her friendless and cold and comfortless? Will I not guard and cherish and solace her? Is there not love in my heart and constancy in my resolves? It will expiate at God's tribunal. It's almost like he's saying his vows right now. I know my Maker sanctions what I do. For the world's judgment, I wash my hands thereof. For man's opinion, I defy it. But what had befallen the night? The moon was not yet set, and we were all in shadow, so it's definitely night now. I could scarcely see my master's face, near as I was. And what ailed the chestnut tree? It writhed and groaned. And that's an allusion to Paradise Lost by John Milton. And so it's like, this allusion's really important because Jane is tempted by Rochester, which could lead to a fall like Adam and Eve. And so in Paradise Lost, the line is, all nature groaned when Eve ate the apple. And just for funsies, we have that road Milton in Flagstaff, and that was named because one of the Reardon daughters loved John Milton as a writer so much that she named the street after him. So literature is important, guys. We must go in, said Mr. Rochester. The weather changes. I could have sat with thee till morning, Jane. And so, thought I, could I with you. I should have said so, perhaps, but a livid, vivid spark leapt out of a cloud at which I was looking, and there was a crack, a crash, and a close rattling peal, and I thought only of hiding my dazzled eyes against Mr. Rochester's shoulder. So it's a sympathetic fallacy. Nature doesn't like this proposal because it's a sin, and you'll find out why later. So nature is acting, trying to like drive them out. So it's not like the romantic like wedding or proposal that we see. It's it's not good. The rain rushed down. He hurried me up the walk, through the grounds and into the house, but we were quite wet before we could pass the threshold. He was taking off my shawl in the hall and shaking the water out of my loosened hair when Mrs. Fairfax emerged from her room. Also loosened hair, like putting your hair down like you only do that in bed. It's like you've been up to something naughty, right? Even though it's just because the rain like messed with her hair, but still. I did not observe her at first, nor did Mr. Rochester. The lamp was lit. The clock was on the stroke of 12. Hasten to take off your wet things, said he, and before you go, good night, my darling. He kissed me repeatedly, and Mrs. Fairfax is watching this, and she's like, oh my gosh, the master's getting with the governess. This is not good. Like, that's got to be what she's thinking. When I looked up on leaving his arms, there stood the widow, pale, grave, and amazed. I only smiled at her and ran upstairs. So she has, like, no shame, right? That's what Mrs. Fairfax is thinking, is like, wow, she's just kissing this guy and, like, is not ashamed. She smiled back, right? Explanation will do for another time, thought I. Still, when I reached my chamber, I felt a pang at the idea that she should even temporarily misconstrue what she had seen. But joy soon effaced even every other feeling, and loud as the wind blew, near and deep as the thunder crashed, fierce and frequent as the lightning gleamed, cataract-like as the rain fell during a storm of 2 hours' duration, I experienced no fear and little awe. Mr. Rochester came thrice to my door in the course of it to ask if I was safe and tranquil, and that was comfort, that was strength for anything. Before I left my bed in the morning, little Adele came running in to tell me that the great horse chestnut at the bottom of the orchard had been struck by lightning in the night, and that half of it split away. So that's nature directly showing its disapproval.